Hi there, knife people, hello lady and gentlemen. I am on travel. As you can see, I'm in a hotel, and I would like to share with you some of my thoughts about the knife that was recently released, and I brought it on travel as my main EDC for this trip. This is Kershaw Bellair Clip, or as I quickly started calling it, Bel Air 2.0. And no, I'm not talking about the obvious blade shape change. First, after taking the blade out, I thought the construction was identical, except for the obvious handle material. What remained the same is this crazy 4 washers and 2 bearings sandwich assembly at the pivot. But, and you might have spotted it already, they made one major change. What I discovered upon removing the blade, they went from these cheap-looking nylon single-row bearings with wiggly, barely retained bearing balls on the right here to this very nice, compact multi-row bearing on the left. Why is it important to have 16 bearing balls versus 10 on the original? So here I sketched what represents a thrust bearing. That is what's used in these knives. And on the left, I'm going to show you what's going on with a single row bearing. And I'm going to draw these bearing balls here, spacing them roughly the same way proportionately to how they would be spaced on the actual bearing. Now I'm going to transfer the representation of each ball to this side view of the bearing. So you're kind of looking at it from the edge. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of spacing between each ball in the horizontal direction there. Why is it important? May not be what you think, because no, it does not help smoother rotation, because fewer bearing balls mean less friction. Where it does matter, and I'll show you in a second, is in the side loading. So when you're cutting through material, especially if you're cutting through wood or something harder than paper, there's quite a bit of force that is distributed from the blade to these bearing surfaces. Of course, if you had a flat washer there, that force would be distributed over the entire surface. But each bearing ball has 2 points of contact with bearing surfaces, top and bottom. So you're distributing the entire force over those few points. While in a flat washer situation, that force would be distributed around the entire washer. So how does the multi-row bearing close this gap? Well, let me show you, and you see what's coming. I'm going to project these balls onto the end view here, or side view, whichever you call it. And by the time I transfer every single one of them and add these little side force vectors to each bearing ball, what you can see, that forest of contact points distributes the side loading in much more efficient manner. And what is the goodness in this? Well, let me show you what the single row bearing did to the washers when I torture tested my Bel Air 1.0. And my subscribers already know which video am I talking about, so please subscribe and become a regular viewer and hopefully commenter on my channel. There are 2 reasons why these washers got so damaged. The obvious one, they're soft steel. The second reason is a little less obvious. You see, the inside diameter of these nylon bearings is significantly larger than the outside diameter of the pivot nut. And that allows the bearing to free float. So they just happen to be in a certain position when I tightened the pivot. And here you go. And I only tightened maybe a quarter of the turn, and you can see the indentations that the bearing balls left in those soft washers. You know what's cool about this? Even though it was already a best-selling knife, they actually listened. And so here they are, a much tighter tolerance, higher quality, multi-row bearings. Don't believe me? Take a look. The inside diameter got smaller, and the outside diameter got larger, so now it's a ZBP, zero bearing plate. Before this knife arrived to my house, I had a little bit of a concern. My cutter scales tend to be thicker than those made out of aluminum, so I was worried whether or not the operation of the crossbar would be impeded. Alas, I was worried for nothing. they managed to make the handle only 10,000ths of an inch thicker, and it does not impede anything in the knife's operation. I'll put it this way, you will notice a lot more difference in texture feel in hand from switch to my cutter than from the thickness increase. This, by the way, is excellent quality mic cutter. Texture-wise, it's somewhere between fire hose and denim mic cutter. They put a lot of thought in the finer details such as this. And speaking of finer details, starting at the tip. This one happens to be super crisp and pointy, but at what expense? 99% of knives I reviewed either come over-stropped or not stropped at all. Let's take a look down blade. I see plenty of sharpening burrs, so this knife was not stropped at the factory. Well, if you shell out $150 on a knife, invest another 15 into a strop, and I provide a link to one made in Ukraine that I personally use. Using my link will help me sustain my channel financially, so thanks in advance. And here I spot something else. Can you see this alternating pattern right here? That's an evidence of the rebound. Usually happens when you don't catch the blade just right on the bell and goes like zig, 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 zig. And while it doesn't really change anything about the knife, it should never made to quality control. This tip is perfect on both sides actually, and the rest of the grind is mostly consistent on the straightaway. But here's this vibration pattern again. So Kershaw, if you are watching, please buy a swivel loop for your quality inspector, because these three letters supposed to mean something more than just your factory's location. I feel this is worth a detour. I feel like I have just the right tools for the job to take care of these two little pesky problems, starting with the SY tool 2000 grit sharpening plate with which I hone the edge. A very important detail here, except for the plate's own weight, I apply zero downward pressure, holding the plate loosely between my thumb and forefinger and letting gravity align it to the edge. Once I see and feel that the burr is gone, I am going to strop it, and I'm using this high quality strop that I mentioned earlier. Again, I'm not applying much pressure, and the media on the leather is 1500 grit diamond paste, which I will also link in the description. And the last piece to my honing stropping puzzle is using the smooth side of the leather with 3000 diamond paste grit media, which by the way is made in the US. Don't forget to clean the edge thoroughly before flipping the strop to the finer side. On this side I do apply a little bit of a downward pressure, equivalent to the amount of pressure you would apply to a ball pen when writing on the printer paper. In my humble personal opinion, there are no rules in stropping, but there is a guiding principle, and it is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. I clean the blade using naphtha, also known as a lighter fluid. It cuts right through any greases that were in that paste and leaves me with a nice clean edge, which is going back under the microscope right now. You should be able to see these crosshatch striations from my honing, and you shouldn't be able to see any burr left because we succeeded in removing it, but the vibration striations are still there. That sounds like a job for a fixed angle sharpener. This is a 7/1000th of an inch thick 4-pound fishing line monofilament, and we will attempt to whittle it with a newly stropped edge. Folks, I'm doing my level best to hold it under microscope while I'm cutting, but it's challenging. You can see I am splitting the line in half. Ladies and gentlemen, the fact that I'm able to do this just by honing and stropping the blade tells me that the blade is pretty well heat treated, still is at its peak performance. And in a few seconds, I'm going to put it on my Rockwell tester to validate this theory. Meanwhile, I was able to split the same line in half again, getting me down to about 1.2 thousandth of an inch. And here's my Rockwell machine. As usual, I start by validating its calibration with the test block, which is independently NIST certified by an American company and serialized. Its hardness is 62 HRC. Rockwell testing is a slow and deliberate process, that's why I sped up the video 2x, mindful of your time. And it takes about 15 seconds per poke to do that. As you can see, it measured 62.4, some 0.4 above the nominal value, and it is within both factory spec and ASTM E19. Here's the new style clip point blade. I intend to test both blades, including the original sheep's foot, that is PVD coated, and I recommend not skipping through this part of the video because it can get really confusing very fast if you do. I also accelerated the video 2x just to be mindful of your time. As always, I use this lull in the video to thank my regulars, my subscribers, my regular commenters. Let's see what we got. I am reading 63.5. That is decent. Very decent indeed. I'm going to skip some of the boring parts here. Let's see poke number 2, 63.9. It's pretty high for MagnaCut. Let's check out poke number 3. Whoa, 64.2. What's funny, other companies out there advertise this range of hardness as high hard MagnaCut, and Kershaw here casually, they don't even bother listing their hardness on the website. And here's the PVD coated sheep's foot from the very, very early production batch. Let's see what it does. 61.9 HRC. Remember, this is the blade that I bent the tip on in one of my videos. We got 62.4 in the second poke. And I have to say, the rumors out there are correct. PVD coating reduces the result of a hardness test by 1 point. Notice how I said the result of the test, not the blade's hardness. I did it on purpose, so let's discuss the difference in the comments. 62.4 again. I can't speak for all Kershaw Bellair knives, but these two blades have a range of 62 to 64 HRC. And now we are moving on to toughness and durability demonstration for this knife as a system. First, I secured the blade in this hardwood vise. It's about ½ an inch deep in the vise. And the angle on this carpenter's compass is set to 15 degrees. So now I'm going to apply the load and bend the blade to the 15-degree mark. I think I went a little shallow. Let's do it again. Okay, here I am at 15 degrees. And I'm going to do it a couple more times just to make sure the blade does not deform permanently. Hopefully it'll come back to the original shape after each of these exercises. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to twist the blade as hard as I can, as hard of a grip on the handle as I possibly can, and I'm going to twist it 3 times in each direction, and that stresses all the internal knife's hardware to its limits. Alright, let's see if the blade stayed straight. I don't see any issues there. The functionality is as good as it was out of the box. No blade play opened up in any direction. Let's check for blade straightness on this steel anvil, which is very flat on the top. And to do that, I place the tip, apply pressure, and try to feel if there's any rocking.
I listen for the sound, and it sounds about the same on each side, so I'm certain the blade remained completely straight.